In recent history, since the 1986 Constitutional Convention, several attempts were made to amend the Constitution of the Philippines. The topic of charter change was raised again when President Aquino mentioned that he was open to the possibility of revising the Constitution. But what is charter change and how is it done? Charter change refers to the political and legal processes needed to amend the Constitution of the Philippines. In order for any amendment to happen, three methods were provided by the Constitution. The first is through People's Initiative, wherein a petition comprising the signatures of 12% of the total population of registered voters is presented to Congress. The second method is through Constituent Assembly, wherein 3/4 of the total members of Congress and Senate will make a vote to amend the Constitution. The third and final method is via Constitutional Convention, which needs the vote of 2/3 of all its members to submit the proposal to the electorate. Dr. Jose Abueva, chairman of the Consultative Constitutional Commission under President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo's administration, is one of the many people who are in favor of charter change.
The 1987 Constitution, to me, is an ideal constitution with respect to the vision to build a just and humane society. A really democratic government, a government that would initiate a regime of truth, justice and freedom, love, equality and peace. But it is a very bad constitution. It restored our rotten presidential government and our highly centralized unitary system.
If charter change was to push through within President Aquino's administration, Dr. Abueva has this to say.
President Aquino, if he really wants to have a lasting legacy, one would be the economic provisions, regional autonomy given to the Bangsamoro, but applicable to the rest of the country. That will make his presidency very meaningful. Dalawang basic changes. Kahit wag mo na yung parliamentary government, that might take a lot more time. And 2 years may not be enough for that. Pero at least gawa yung dalawang amendments. Malaking bagay na yan. The whole country will be benefited.
Given what we know about charter change, is this something that can be done during the remaining years of President Aquino's administration? What other proposals were raised since the implementation of the 1987 Constitution? How will charter change benefit the Filipino today and in the near future? Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk on 9TV. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno. Tonight, we will discuss all you need to know about charter change and if and how this can benefit all Filipinos and the country.
Our guest for tonight is former Senator and lawyer Attorney Rene Saguisa. Good evening and thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, Senator.
Actually, we should also call him Professor. He's my
Yes.
co-faculty at the San Beda Graduate
Yeah,
Law
we can call him many things now. We can Senator, Attorney, Mr.
Anything.
But siguro, we'll call you na lang Senator out of respect, sir, because
Yes.
you're a senator.
Wag nyo na lang pagsasabing once upon a time.
And he left
Okay.
a great legacy as a senator, so he
left
deserves the title.
Definitely, as I mentioned before the show, I'm a big fan. I grew up during those years, no? Those exciting years in the 80s. No?
Kamag-anak kita siguro.
Hindi naman, sir. Talagang, I mean that. I think a lot of my generation feel that. Now, Senator, you were obviously part of that in those
Before
those,
the 1987
the 80s. Well, before the 87 Constitution, and you're involved there, and we saw we witnessed this 1987 Constitution being put together. Now there's a lot of calls, no, about charter change, and they call it cha-cha. Let me ask you, our first question is cha-cha a bad word? Is charter change a bad word in and by itself?
Not in itself, dahil any constitution being the work of men can be perfected or improved. And in fact, sa ating kasaysayan, ito ang pinakamahabang walang modification eh. Yung
So, since 87.
1898, short-lived. 1935, in a few years, amended. 1973, na ang tawag namin doon, Siopaw Constitution. Sino sa inyo may gusto ng Siopaw? Taasan ng kamay. O, lagay mo, 99%. And then, 1986, freedom. Yung 1986, the work of appointed delegates.
Delegates, yeah.
But that was how the U.S. Constitution was enacted. It was the work of appointive delegates. Kaya wala sa ano yun wala sa election o appointment.
Yeah.
Ngayon, meron tayo ng 87 and it has not been modified in any manner, shape, or form for the last almost 3 decades. So it's time na pag-aralan natin dahil maraming JBC, yung term limits, masyado bang maiksi. Nung panahon namin, pagtanyada ka, you can go on and on. And so long ka.
Yung dynasty.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Kasi itong naging term limits, ang naging tuloy, lumabas sa mga dynasties, ipapark muna kay Mrs. o sa Kulasisi, mga anak, tapos babalik na naman.
Yeah.
Maybe that should be changed. Tsaka yung 3 years parang maiksi.
For a Congress.
Balik ulit dun sa...
Actually, I'd like to share
Yeah.
them because my great-grandfather was part of the 1935 Constitutional Commission. So he was part of the men who drafted our 1935 Constitution. And when I was studying basically the transcripts of the proceedings, they didn't even have women's rights to vote at that time. So obviously, as you can see, the Constitution, tama si Senator Sagui said, could be perfected over time.
Yeah.
And I guess my next question is, Senator, may pinagkaiba ba ang revision of a Constitution and amendment of a Constitution from a legal perspective?
Well, ang usapan nga ngayon, yung pasok ni Speaker Sonny Belmonte, yung economic provisions daw to attract foreign investors dahil mukhang kulang yata sa local sources. And then, ang pinag-aawayan ngayon, yung extension.
The term limits.
For instance, yun, Senator Sagisag, yung difference between changing economic provisions and then extending the term limit. Kunwari, either one or both ang palitan, would that constitute revision of the Constitution or amendment of the Constitution?
Well, ang isang concern talaga dyan, pag na-create na yung body, and there are several kinds, no? Mukhang hindi daw makokontrol ang agenda. In other words, kung economic provisions lang, what's to stop them from going elsewhere, no? And there are...
So in other words, when you're open to changing the charter, you can't just specify economic provisions lang.
Baka. Yun ang isang concern, isang view ng mga analysts, na once you create a convention, you cannot tell the convention, focus only on one item.
They can start
Because it
moving
is a separate constitutional body. In the end, it will be what the Supreme Court will say it is. Kung constitutional o hindi. Pero yun nga, 670 days or so na lang si Noy, may panahon pa ba? Dapat tutukan itong problema sa China, itong Bangsamoro, global,
So,
ang daming ibang mas urgent problem.
But so there's no simple solution around it. Parang wala po bang, mas maliit po ba ang scope ng revision from an amendment of the Constitution or is it vice versa? Ano yung, which one of the two methods or legal processes would be short, yung simple?
Kung ililimit ang topic, I would not want yung term extension ng presidente, no? Although I have really problems with 3-year terms or mayors, masyadong maiksi yata. Mas maganda yung 1935. Pero for Noynoy, I hope na in 2016, he will just write a book, plant a tree, and father a child.
Wow. And get married first
And get
before
married, yeah.
fathering a child siguro.
Walang,
In that order, no?
walang akhirong magpapasa ng pangalan eh.
That's right, that's right.
Kaya to me, I think has been punished by the people long enough. I mean, who would want to be president of this ungovernable nation of kadunongs, philosophers? Kami na lang mga columnist. We know all the answers. Kaya lang, magkakontra yung mga prescription namin.
Yung opinions yun, no?
Ayun nga.
So you're saying, Senator, the best time to probably have this would probably be sa next, at the beginning of a term of...
In the beginning,
a term of a president.
yun nga, in the beginning, as of today, mukhang ang perception, the inevitability of George Obama. Kaya ako nakikinig si Jojo ngayon, baka naluluha na yun eh. I mean, president for life.
Jojo ba?
Pero it's true na kasi ginawa ni FBR towards the end, ginawa ni GMA towards the end, sumipa ang tao. Nilabanan yung People's Initiative. So, comparatively, the best time maybe to do it is at the beginning of a presidential term.
Yeah.
Okay.
Para wala masyadong agenda.
Yeah, dahil ang suspicion magiging self-serving, perpetuation, etc.
Although I suppose one issue would be if it's the start of some president's term would be yung credibility niya. Hindi pa masyadong established for people to follow this president if it's time to also amend or revise the Constitution. But we'll discuss more of that, especially the three ways that we can also amend the Constitution or start a charter change. But for now, we'll take a short break. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages. You're still watching Legal Help Desk on 9TV with our guest, Attorney Rene Sagisag.
Yeah, we were discussing earlier with the Senator Sagisag, of course, yung difference between revision and amendment before we were cut by the break. Yes.
And,
Well, the way we try to teach it is kung limited to a minor change, amendment. Kung major, it's a revision. And the way I try to explain it in class, kumbaga term limits lang, mayors, maaaring 4 years, walang limit ang re-election. That would be an amendment. Parang hair transplant.
Hair transplant lang.
But
Minor.
if you went from presidential to parliamentary, that would be
A major change.
a major change. That would be a revision.
A revision.
Dahil it changes the heart of the system.
Okay. Yeah.
Kaya miski ilang changes lang yon, and I think my friend Adolfo Ascuna identified only certain amendments sa presidential, we could go parliamentary. Pero pag parliamentary din, anong modelo? Gusto ba natin sundin yung nangyayari ngayon sa Thailand na
They have
military
a-
na naman?
yes, but they have a
Pag
royal
Japan
family.
naman, may kailangan, may emperor. England, ganun din, may queen. Sa France yata, malakas ang presidente sa sistema. But yun nga, there are so many models ng parliamentary which have failed in Africa, etc. Kaya nung pang 1971, nadidinig ko na yung kay Alexander Pope, for forms of governments, let fools contest. Whatever is best administered is best. Kaya, ayun nga, pag nag-parliamentary, ano ba, baka Thailand tayo ngayon, nakakagulo.
What about a model like Singapore? Because a lot of people were saying, because kanina yung sinasabi niyo po earlier
Singapore.
na mga Filipinos very unruly, magulo. So, a lot of people have commented in the past na what the Philippines need is a benevolent
Strong leader.
dictator, strong leader
Benevolent,
na
strong
parang
leader,
Lee
Kasi
Kuan Yew.
nung
Do you
six-
think there's a model na parang Singapore that would fit the Philippines?
Nang umiral yung, ilatag yung walang habag na batas militar, Marcos could have been a Lee Kuan Yew. But he blew it. Kasi si Lee Kuan Yew, did very well for his people. Eh si Marcos did very well for his family and cronies. Pero yun, talagang kung naging Lee Kuan Yew si McCoy, we in the human rights community would have been in the fringes, ang magugulo na, etc. In other words, sabi ni Marcos, okay, walang freedom but I'll give you bread. In the end, wala nang bread, wala pang freedom. Kaya talagang we learned our lesson. But Singapore, kaya lang, mas maliit ang population, no?
Yeah.
Baka hindi workable dito.
We're
Dahil
7,000
ngayon,
islands, no?
ay, hindi nga makaawa si Lee Kuan Yew, please make babies.
Yeah.
Dahil wala, negative ang growth rate. And the native Singaporeans, walang mga anak eh. Kaya siguro yung mga walang trabaho rito, can we be of any service?
Yeah. Now, if
We'll import the babies.
Okay. There are several changes we mentioned. There is economic revisions or amendments. There's also the regarding the judicial power, clipping the judicial powers. There's also the political amendments. No, we were talking about. We touched on it a little bit.
Yung sa economic, I may not know enough about it, no? But many respectable authorities say na talagang yung 60-40 has been a hindrance. So, it would be an experiment. Sabi nga ni Holmes, all life is an experiment, no?
Yeah.
Pero yung isang amendment na gusto kong makita dyan, tagpasin yung grave abuse of discretion. Igaya lang ang Estados, ang Supreme Court natin, sa Estados Unidos, yun ang model natin eh. In the US, sabi sa Marbury v. Madison in 1803, pagka illegal o unconstitutional, nullified. Pero walang, sa aking karanasan, obserbasyon, wala ako nakikita sinabi ng unelected Supreme Court, you elected President, you elected Congress, you have not only abused your discretion, but gravely at that. In other words, gusto kong ibalik na same level our Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court. Alam, paliwanag ni Chief Justice Roberto Concepcion dyan, noong July 10, 1986, ayaw niyang maulit yung mga abuso ng martial law. Unanimous Supreme Court order na an habeas corpus. Sasabihin nila, teka muna, may aso yan, may et cetera. Kaya yan ang isang dapat nating pag-aralan kung ipaparehas na naman. Dahil sa Amerika, sabi ni Alexander Bickel, the Supreme Court is the least dangerous branch. To me, it is the most dangerous branch. Unelected. Re-reviewin ang anti-terrorism law, wholesale. Kaya yan, medyo yata...
Maybe you're open to some
overreach
okay.
is a valid criticism.
Okay. Now, Senator, if you don't mind, we have some questions from our viewers. Connie is asking, would it be better if we adopted, I think you touched on this already, if we adopted the presidential system of the United States where the elected official will serve a maximum of 2 terms, totaling 8 years?
Well, that was what we had, no? Pero yun nga, parang ni Quezon, nakiusap na pahabain yung term, and then it led to a Marcos. Pero doon sa Amerika, talagang si Delano Roosevelt yata, 4 terms. Yung 2 terms should be enough. Technically, may nagsasabi, Noynoy can run as vice president in 2016. Maybe Binay Aquino. Oh, pero to me, you cannot do indirectly what you cannot do directly.
Yes.
At anong gagawin nun? Di pa i-impeach na si Jojo. Mabalik na.
But that's interesting. That's a
Yeah.
gray area because our constitution is not clear that if you go to a vice presidential or other position that you're violating the term limit, no? I mean, it's a gray area. So
a gray
that's a very
area.
interesting
But
point.
it's a
Senator.
spirit,
Yeah. Yes.
Spirit, kasi if something happens to...
Na talagang, kasi ang philosophy, tama si Charles de Gaulle, the cemeteries are full of indispensable people.
Yeah, that's quite true.
That's true.
Said by a man who has a whole city with bones underneath.
That's right.
Okay, our next question is from Topher. How is a federal system of government better than our present government system? what are your thoughts on proposals of shifting to parliamentary system of government? So kanina, I think,
Ano
Senator
model
Saguisas
nga
already
natin?
said, yung parliamentary magulo.
Nagkakagulo sa Thailand. Hindi natin naiintindihan yung parliamentary, yung mga vote of... Kasi sa hilig natin sa eleksyon, baka mayat maya vote of confidence voting
Wala pa,
para
iba-ibang
kumita.
prime minister.
I think what most people are thinking of is essentially a unicameral system where there's maybe a prime minister, ganun, and the president is the symbolic head. Maybe let's start with that, yung mga ganun.
Kamukha sa Thailand, mukhang zero camera lang nangyari doon. Kaya,
But one of their advantages is they have a royal king, a family that the people, even the military, respect. So parang tayo, yun yung problema. Wala tayong symbolic head na makikinig sila. But what about a federal system? That's the US model.
President?
Well, yes.
A
May president ka, pero
yeah.
federal. So may
Paano?
pagka-decentralized.
Let's say a federal decentralized.
dahil lang sa Amerika, federal
yes.
ang presidente.
President, oo.
And it has worked very well for them. Dahil number one country ngayon yun So that is what we are trying to imitate. But so far, mukhang maraming false starts and may biases. 20 years si Marcos, wala nangyari. 10 years ng mga Arroyos, tayo tuloy-tuloy pa rin sa balon ng kapariwaraan.
I love your optimism.
I love the terms. I wish I had that.
Kapariwaraan.
I wish I had that in my arsenal.
Well, hindi niya inabot si Eddie Ilarde nung araw Nagtampisaw sa batis ng kaligayahan.
All right, Rafael asked, what were the reasons why previous attempts for charter change were unsuccessful? Is it possible that the people are not yet ready for it? Kasi every time you mention Chacha, may
I think,
certain sector
Rod,
talaga, no?
the trauma was from the martial law years.
Yeah.
Diba? Coming from 1935, na-amend yung constitution natin 1973, and yun dun nagkaroon ng presidential decrees that had the power of law. So basically, nawala
Yeah.
yung separation ng power between the president and legislative. And then, Senator Saguisag mentioned, the Supreme Court na controlled pa.
Yung separation of powers, mukhang na-overstress yun. Dahil may konsepto rin tayo, blending of powers. Kamukha sa Makati, ang alam ko, sa Taguig, ang laki ng tulong ng local government units sa judiciary. May pakotse, may allowances. And that should not stop. I mean, dahil talagang merong mayayaman local government units.
Yes.
Dito, separation. You're all co-workers in government trying to give our people better service and a better life. Kaya huwag tayong papatay dyan sa mga theoretical concepts. What is it on the ground? We cannot keep our feet planted firmly in mid-air. Yun ang nangyayari minsan Konsepto, pero yun sa tunay na buhay, iba ang nangyayari. Kaya yun, yung pagtulong ng local government units, huwag naman sabihin na justice so-and-so, na cross-border yan, bawal yan. Ba't kayo makikinabang dyan?
Right.
And I think talagang kamukha nung bata ako, which was a long time ago, government was able to pay people above the level of corruption. Kaya ang titino ng huwes noon, sa Manila, isa lang ang may chismis. Sa Pasig, ang mga judges Cecilia Muñoz Palma. So we need to bring back that area na we can lay down the economic foundation of honesty to put these public officials above the level of temptation and corruption. Kasi ngayon talaga nakakatukso dahil ang liliit ng sahod. Sabi nga ni Oscar Wilde, I can resist everything except temptation.
And the salaries are provided in the Constitution.
Alin?
Yung salaries po
Yung salaries
ng presidente,
ng
senators, nasa Constitution po ba ito?
I think those who are well-paid BSP, no? And then sa mga government financial institutions, and also medyo attractive na ang lowest level judges dahil they get paid more than 100,000 a month at may mga possible local government benefits
assistance.
pa. So, I have faith. I am encouraged by what's happening. We're able to bring back or start bringing back the conditions when we were young. Hindi natutok sa mga judges noon dahil bastante ang sahod eh. Pero remember, nung ako'y batang abogado, 4 pesos a day ang minimum. 120 a month. And that could support a family. Sa amin sa Pasig, 7 kami, pinakamaliit, no? We were poor. What we didn't feel we were poor. Ngayon, ang alam ko, miski mag-asawa lang, isa, 2 anak, very tight daw ang budgeting.
Well, that's the effect of inflation.
At wala
no?
pa tayong, ito ang isang matinding problema, dapat tinututukan natin. National health care. Kasi pag nagamot ka sa mga ospital na ano dyan paglabas mo, nakita mo yung bill mo, baka mabinat ka baka matuluyan ka pa.
So kanina, to answer the question of our viewer, basically, most yung failures ng past attempts at cha-cha were because of the trauma siguro and the, tama ba, yung mga bad experiences.
Is it because
in the past.
you think that's the reason why people are allergic with cha-cha? You think
Yung bad experiences
na-trauma
in the
sila
past?
sa past? Kasi every time I mention yung word na cha-cha, ay, wag yan, it's a bad word. And everyone nag-aalsa.
Ano bang tingin nyo? Malakas ang cha-cha ngayon o
My general feeling is it's not so much gaining ground.
wala?
Well, we shall see.
No, dahil-
Today, there were
That's my
some
feel.
Yung-
rallies against it.
Yung takot nga na baka... Pero yung iba
Baka
namang
ma-abuse yung powers.
maraming columnists din ay hindi ba na mag-extension, natatakot kay Jojo. I mean,
Yeah.
Tulfo, Neil Cruz, Daki Paredes, gano'n lang.
Yeah.
Kasi tingin all the saints will go marching in. Ako,
Okay, I think we need to look into that with supported surveys. We still have more to discuss with our guest, Legal Help Desk. We'll return, so stay tuned. You're still watching Legal Help Desk on 9TV with our guest, Attorney Rene Sagisag.
Now, Senator, as you mentioned earlier, no, there's some changes in the Constitution na hindi naman major, so we call those amendments. And then, pag malaki yung overall revision siya. Now, I guess some people are asking, kung amendment ba or revision, is the process the same? Meaning we have to go through either of the 3 that you mentioned, the People's Initiative, the CONAS,
dahil-
Constitutional Assembly, or...
aside from those
Constitutional Convention.
identified earlier, there is a school of thought that you can modify the Constitution through ordinary legislation, meaning propose sa one chamber, concurred in by the other chamber, dahil ang tingin nila, ang testing, ratification. So,
But that seems to be the process, Attorney Sagisag. If you have the Constituent Assembly wherein you have the
no, ang
two-thirds vote,
Constituent Assembly,
You convert
House
it.
and Senate together.
sabay
Oh,
dapat.
Pero yung ordinary legislation, it will act independently as in passing an ordinary law.
Right.
Anyway, sabi nila, litmus test naman ratification
Right.
Kung approve ng tao.
You say it's a school of thought, but is that possible? You think it can happen?
Well, I have read some respectable authorities assert na that's a fourth mode, PI, CONAS, CONCON, and ordinary legislation. Because they say, raratify naman yan or rejectin
And you think it won't be declared as unconstitutional?
By the Supreme Court.
Yan na naman. Kaya nga sabi niya, clip the powers of the Supreme
So
Court.
you're for that. You're for clipping the powers of the Supreme Court.
No, I want to bring it down to the level of the U.S. Supreme Court, our model. Dahil talagang doon, sinasabi lang, ang Constitution lang ginawa mo. Pero hindi, ikaw, gago kang, abusado ka, halal ka nga. Pero inabuso mo, discretion mo. That should not be done where the branches are supposed to be co-equal. Dahil sa ganong sistema, it is superior to the other 2 branches.
Yes.
Kaya tumilang, bring it to the level of the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay. Assuming, Attorney Sagisag, na ganun yung naging amendment that it just defines one of the powers of the Supreme Court as not ruling on grave abuse of discretion or pinalitan lang yung ibang economic provisions. Pagka ba amendment, ito yung napapalitan yung pangalan ng Constitution? To the extent na parang yung nangyari dati, 1973 naging 1987 Constitution. Obviously, that was a revision, a major overhaul. Pero pag amendments lang, pinapalitan po ba yung pangalan ng Constitution?
No, dahil palagay ko, hindi. Pero anyway, tanggalin lang yung grave abuse of discretion given what has happened. Pero yung pagbabago ng pangalan, kasi to me, I try to teach na pito yan Biyak na Bato, Malolos, 1935, Commonwealth. 1943, World War II. 1973, Siopaw Constitution. 1986, Freedom. And then 1987, Cory Constitution, for lack of a better term. Pero yun nga, it's been almost 3 decades. Tignan natin kung talagang may mga dapat baguhin dyan. Merong nagsasabi, tanggalin na yung JBC. Dahil nung araw, yung commission appointment, sabi nila, mas may transparency.
Now, if you had your choice, let's say you had to choose, no? Let's say maybe the 4 or 5 items that have to be changed now or that you feel that should be prioritized. Ano po yun?
Well, yung una nga, yung grave abuse of discretion, the way it's been distorted by this Supreme Court with its expansionary appetite. Number 2, yung JBC, baka mas magaling nga yung commission on appointments. More transparency. Dahil, again, another Roberto Concepcion baby yan But it has to work the way it was envisioned by Chief Judge Berting. And then, naiiksyan ako doon sa 3 years lang. Kapapanalo pa lang ng mayor, nangangampanya
Or even
naman
Congress. Congress is
Yan
the
ang
same,
nangyayari. Kung yan ibabalik doon sa 4 years, makakatutok sa trabaho for 2 years at least. So ito ang mga changes. At saka yun nga, if it is estanyada running, salonga running, why limit them to 2 terms?
So you're open to having as many terms?
Yeah, pero yun nga, nangyari, ipinapark lang doon sa asawa, doon sa anak. Kaya to me, that's another demonstration of the law of unintended consequences. So those are some of the changes that should be part of the agenda. Yun namang extension ng term ni Noy, I'm against it. Noy, magpahinga ka na.
Yeah.
At father a child.
Plan to three nga and write a book.
Ako naman,
diba?
ang dagdag ko lang doon, marry first,
Marry
before
first.
fathering a child. Para din naman walang
Baka kailangan niya
issue.
munang asawa bago to have a child. Sabagay, hindi naman unconstitutional yung gagawin niya. So,
Dahil walang problema yon. Dahil talagang kakalmutin ang paa niya ng nanay niya pagka hindi ginawa yung... Pero ang problema sa ngayon, dahil nagkakaroon nga sa China ng one-child policy, pero dito, ma-reform ba sa Constitution na strictly one-wife policy?
hindi natin malagay sa Constitution yan, no? Hindi natin alam.
Hindi ma-enforce dito. Dahil magre-rebelde, matataas sa tao mag-umpisa
Kayo talaga, meron na nga vowsy law at meron na nga tayong law on concubinage and yet you insist on this illegality.
We're treading along
Okay.
dangerous waters. Now, we still have some questions from our viewers. Aurea asks, what was the logic behind the 60-40 division between Filipino and foreign investors? Is economic liberalization achievable before or by 2016? I know you said that this is probably not your forte, but
ang
your thoughts.
intention nga doon, the way I understood it, is to enable Filipinos to maintain control of the economy.
Yes.
But again, nung bata pa ako, pinagbawal doon sa Republic Act 1157, Retail Trade Nationalization Act.
Yes.
Binigyan ng 10 years mag-phase out para mawala yung mga nasa kantong mga incheck, no? Pero ano nangyari? Nag-wholesale, kaya kontrolado ngayon ng... In other words, again, unintended consequence.
Right.
Kaya lang yun, we keep experimenting, sabi nga ni Holmes, all life It's an experiment.
How about owning land, for example? Di ba?
Ano,
60-40,
owning land, di ba? Yung, di ba sabi nila dapat
Ang
Filipinos lang.
concern ng mga nationalist dyan, baka lalong dumami ang Filipinos who cannot afford their own. Eh sa ngayon, alam ko dyan ang daming lupang nasa pangalan ng Pinoy, pero ang may-ari, kung sino-sino ng foreigners.
Even if we have the anti-dummy law. But you know, something I teach to my students with respect to the economic provisions na masyadong restrictive, is that I think we can control by legislation yung whatever concerns we have. We don't have to strictly put it in the Constitution na 60-40, yung masyadong restrictive, masyadong inflexible. When in fact, you have regulations that control. Yung kunwari, land ownership, that when it becomes, when you have a Filipino trying to buy land, then you can have a regulation which allows them to acquire it at a lesser price compared to foreign counterparts. I mean, I'm just saying as an example na hindi kailangan lahat nakalagay strictly in the Constitution na mas mahirap i-amend, no?
Right.
We have another question from Ingrid. Why is it that whenever a bill is passed into law, someone will block it, stating that some or all of its provisions are unconstitutional? Does the Senate or Congress check with the Constitution to make sure that the bills they pass are in fact constitutional? So parang tinatanong niya, nag-homework ba in the first place? Because di ba, RH bill, yung recently, the libel provision of the electronic commerce law, parang lagi na lang merong question on constitutionality. So ang tanong ni Ingrid, bakit hindi ba chine-check muna?
Yan ang those are the noises and sounds of democracy. Mga 60,000 na yata tayong abogado ngayon. Ngayon, miski ang linaw-linaw, halimbawa na sa Ligang Batas, 2 months before the election up to June 30, no appointment. Pero ninombrahan pa rin si Rene Corona post-midnight by a caretaker president. And yun ang nanaig until overturned by the people through the impeachment process. Kaya yan, talagang the law is what the Supreme Court says it is.
That's right.
Which is also under our Constitution, that they're the final arbiters, no?
They're also the
of what
constitutional body. Right? So,
should be. Okay.
all right. Justin asks, aside from job creation, what are the other benefits of economic charter change?
Well, the hope is that there will be more employment, no need for people to go abroad with its hidden social cost. Dahil mukhang kulang ang capitalization, consource lang locally. Kaya yun ang natutunghayan ko na sinasabi ng mga proponents of amending 60-40.
Right.
Okay. Sige. But
Alright.
that's all very interesting. And
Yeah.
I think we're just skimming the top of
But I'd like to ask the senator what he thinks. No? Obviously, since we're talking about charter change, the Constitution, and then the unconstitutionality, as mentioned by the Supreme Court, no, as declared by the Supreme Court regarding DAP and all that. What are your thoughts on that? You think that, of course, the Supreme Court has already spoken. They said that it's unconstitutional. But can Pinoy, for example, say, well, look, we followed the administrative code, which came ahead of the Constitution?
Well, yun ang
ano ngayon. Yun ang
institutional arrangement natin ngayon. The Supreme Court can correct any error by any lower court or any branch of government, but the errors of the Supreme Court become the law of the land. Kaya sabi nga nung iba, the Supreme Court is supreme in its errors.
Okay, very interesting thoughts. And of course, that ruling on the DAP is still under MR, right? Motion for reconsideration.
May motion for reconsideration.
So I think we shall see pa kung anong mangyayari. We can't say
by
give the last
finality,
words kung
no?
kung
Alright.
talagang unconstitutional lang lahat. So, thank you po, Senator Rene
Thank you na rin.
Sagisa, Professor
Bago ako
Constitutionalist.
madisbare, tapos
Kinakabahan na siya, ang dami kasi, but you know, Senator,
kinonsente niyo ko.
We were just asking
hindi
a question.
masyadong mabilis yung kung mabilis ang tongue ni
Yeah.
Senator Sagisag, we could not stop, you know, I'm just kidding. But we'd like to thank our guest, Senator Rene Sagisag, for being with us tonight. And for now, we'll have to take another short break. Thank you, Senator Alet.
Thank you,
Thank
Senator.
you.
Thank you for joining us.
Legal Help Desk will come back after this commercial break. With our Welcome back to Legal Help Desk on 9TV.
Oh, yeah.
And today we had a very interesting and timely topic because
Yeah.
this whole discussion on charter change is again alive.
Yeah, and especially now, no? Kasi ang daming, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of laws are being passed and a lot of decisions are being made by the executive that are all being declared or at least being defined as unconstitutional. And now the
Yes.
Supreme Court, lalo itong sa DAP, di ba? They declared the actions of the executive as unconstitutional. You mentioned earlier the RH law, di ba? May mga certain
May mga
provisions
provisions in the
that were
RH law,
declared
yes.
unconstitutional. So the word constitution seems to be kind of a favorite topic. And now earlier we saw a number of people in the streets, no? Again, reacting
Yeah.
to what they claim the president said regarding his term limits.
Yeah, but I like what you asked na, is it really a bad word to say cha-cha or charter change? Because not necessarily, because as we've seen throughout the years, simula 1898, 1935, 1943, nung nagkaroon nga ng World War, and then of course, 1973 Constitution, 1987, and again, yung pinakamahaba na natin is the 1987 Constitution. And even in the US, that's why you have the Fifth Amendment,
Yeah.
Second Amendment, Third Amendment, because it has
Precisely.
to change over time because no law is written in stone. So you have to also adjust to the needs of the time. But I guess the important thing is knowing whether it is called for by the circumstances and whether the people want it. That's why yung marami tayong modes in our Constitution on how to amend or revise our Constitution. And you have what you call the People's Initiative, wherein it's by the vote of at least 12% of the registered voters, or Constituent Assembly, wherein you need 2/3 vote of Congress and Senate voting together. And then, of course, you also have what you call the Constitutional Convention, wherein they have to submit this later on for ratification.
Mga delegates,
and
diba?
of course, according to our guest, Senator Rene Sagisag, who's also a constitutionalist, he was saying that based on legal authorities, there's actually a fourth mode that can be recognized. But this is not in our Constitution, mind you. But basically, he's saying that according to
There's a
some
school of
legal
thought.
authorities, may
There's a
school of thought na it can be by legislation. So, in the same way that you pass a law, dadaan to sa lower house and upper house, Congress and Senate, and then it's valid as a mode because it has to be ratified by the people anyway.
I think overall, no, of course, everyone has his or her opinion regarding charter change. But what's important is that we're open to it. What is being proposed to be changed? Why? And what is the agenda? And I guess ito yung very important yung timing when it's going to be done. Because obviously, whenever you have changes to the Constitution, there are certain people who will or might benefit from it, especially those incumbent who are in power. No? But I think overall, I think the message of the Honorable Senator Sagisag is that we should be open to change. As you mentioned earlier, yan nga, nagbabago tayo, di ba? Mga tao nagbabago and then society changes and we really have to be open to changes as well.
Yes, and
as
of
you
course,
mentioned.
we already have right now a constitution that has been in existence for 3 decades.
tagal
So
na,
yung
no?
mga
Yeah.
ibang provisions, baka nga naman, it's time to revisit. For instance, yung economic provisions, baka it doesn't make sense to limit some business industries to just basically majority Filipinos. Bakit does it make sense? Is it retarding our growth? Those are things we have to really look into, no?
Yeah, tsaka yung mga, as you mentioned earlier, yung mga salaries, di ba? May salaries doon ng president.
Oo,
may
minsan nakalagay kasi
may
doon
salary doon ng senator.
Yeah, and kanina, because of inflation nga, even Senator Sagisag was saying, nung time niya, 4 pesos was enough, 120 pesos
Yeah,
na kikita
yeah.
ka, okay na yun. But now, of course, that's times have changed. So maybe, really, it's time to revisit. But we have to look carefully. Ano
Yes.
ba yung extent, ano yung kailangan baguhin, and who are the people proposing it.
Yan, okay. All right, so that's it for charter change. Now, over the week, we have received some questions from our viewers on topics we have previously discussed. Jamie asks, my husband and I have only been married for 1.5 years, and we are already separated for 3 months. I moved to my parents' house, and during those months, he never visited our infant daughter. The last time we spoke, he said he's thinking of filing for annulment. I don't want to, since I want my daughter to grow up with a complete family, even if my relationship with her father is strained. I'm aware that the only valid reason for our marriage to be annulled is due to psychological incapacity. Therefore, how can I prove that he is the one who is psychologically incapable of being a husband and a father?
Actually, yung question ni Jamie seems to be conflicting in a sense na she was saying she doesn't want an annulment, but
Yeah.
how can she prove that he is the one who's psychologically incapacitated? So, one, Jamie, you're correct that there's only one ground for an annulment, assuming lahat nga ng requirements for the marriage were complied with validly, then hindi basta-basta makakapag-file for an annulment yung asawa mo. And it's not also na basta-basta na lang mag-grant yung annulment. But assuming he files for it, it's also possible that it's either him that will be declared psychologically incapacitated, also possible that it's you. It depends really on the psychological report that you have to get and present to the court.
Yeah. So again, I think to answer your question, you have to make up your mind, because you mentioned earlier that you don't want an annulment. So that is your choice. So you don't. Another option obviously would be legal separation, in which case you are entitled to be separate from your husband, and then you can ask for support. I think kind of
Parang
implied
ganun na yung
na
ginagawa.
abandon yung
Yeah.
the husband has abandoned the infant child, and I am assuming that there's no support. So there is an action for that. You can file an action for support. No? So
Also, another faster route in case your husband refuses to support your child is to get either a barangay protection order or a temporary protection order from the court to make sure that you get support. Because what he is doing, for instance, he does not even see or visit your child and does not give support, that's considered as economic abuse under our new law, which is violence against women and their children.
yeah,
Okay.
okay. So the VAUSI. All right. So that's it. Hopefully,
have
I was
one-
able to answer your question and to clarify any confusion you may have. No, I think the first thing you need to do is to decide whether you want an annulment or not. Right.
And then we have another question from Florife. What can an illegitimate child do to get a share of their inheritance from their father? Do they have to present a paper of some sort? Can the legitimate children deny the illegitimate one their inheritance?
Ayan. Okay, so obviously, when you're claiming illegitimacy, and it depends on the circumstances, no? Sometimes the legitimate family recognize the existence of an illegitimate child, in which case you just have to prove that you've been accepted as an illegitimate child. There are some families like that. But in some instances where patago, it's hidden. The fact that you surface na lang during the wake or something, in which case you really have to show some proof of filiation.
Yes,
to the
and you
father.
can do this, Florife, dun sa, well, I'm not assuming that ikaw yun or whoever, if you're asking this on behalf of a friend or relative, but basically whoever that illegitimate child is would have to intervene dun sa either intestate or testate proceedings. So, assuming nagkakahatian ng mana and it's before a court, you have to go to that court and intervene para ma-take into account itong illegitimate child as one of the rightful heirs, because the legitimate family cannot deny the illegitimate child yung share niya from the inheritance. But again, if this illegitimate child is not recognized by the person who passed away, yung deceased, or what you call the testator, then hindi rin basta-basta makakapagsali na lang or makaka-intervene dun sa court proceedings itong illegitimate child. This illegitimate child would have to prove what you call yung filiation niya doon sa
Relationship.
namatay na person. So that's a separate court proceeding, and this would require proof. And proof would constitute several documentary evidence or yung kahit
birth
testamentary,
certificate, birth certificate if nandun
then-
yung the name of the father, right? Or and letters letters that were written to you.
Or witnesses,
Or witnesses.
right?
Correct. So just like any other court proceeding, now you have to show proof. Now whether it's verbal, written, and obviously the birth certificate if the name of the alleged father is there.
Yeah. But don't forget, on top of all of these, basta ma-prove nyo yung nung illegitimate child na filiated siya, meaning na anak talaga siya nung namatay, he or she is entitled to 1/2 of the share of a legitimate child.
Yeah, so compulsory heir yan.
Yes, so the legitimate family cannot deprive the illegitimate child of his inheritance, his or her.
One half lang, one half of a legitimate child, but you are a compulsory heir. So, hindi pwedeng tanggalin yung legitimate mo. All right?
Okay.
All right. So, we have also received some comments and reviews from our viewers. Edna posted on Facebook. First time I watched your show and already I have learned a lot from it, especially about buying properties in the Philippines. Salamat, more power, and God bless. And God bless to you as well. All right, that is all the time that we have for tonight. We'd like to thank our viewers who sent us their legal questions on social media and our social media pages. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you have any questions or comments on tonight's episode, you may post these at our Facebook and Twitter pages. Join us again next Monday as we discuss your legal rights. Good night.